Hello, everyone, and welcome to the seventh episode of Off the Cuff. There's some interesting topics I've had in my mind I wanted to talk about. Now, this first thing I mentioned it last week, and I wanted to try and get a little more information on it. I really had a lot of trouble. So this is concerning Russia's involvement in Zimbabwe. Now, the interesting thing is, I'm not sure how I feel about it. Now, the first thing I heard about it, really, was some guy made a video and he was saying Russia's bought Zimbabwe. So you can imagine, I was pretty shocked. I was just like, okay, they've just outright bought the country? It doesn't surprise me. Zimbabwe is not exactly high in economic value. Well, at least not on its face value. So that's what I wanted to try and find out more about. Now, I did some reading up, and I found out what's actually happened is the president of Zimbabwe went up to Russia, and they've signed a bunch of deals where Russia's going to invest in quite a few of the industries in Zimbabwe, and they're also helping to train military forces. And yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I've yet to read up on what exactly Russia gets in return, but I can guess it's a few things involving much control over Zimbabwe, and of course a very strong ally. Well, I say very strong ally, an ally. I'm not sure how strong Zimbabwe is, but Africa is actually a rich country in terms of its land. It's huge tracts of land. And it's actually a really huge continent. The map that we all are used to looking at doesn't actually show its scale correctly. It's a huge, huge continent. And it's got a lot of good land in it. Yeah, so sorry, I just keep saying land. So an interesting thing about this is, this is a rather large world power getting involved in another world power. And of course, you got the United States, and you've got the United Kingdom. You've got many people here in the Western world looking at it and saying, "Oh, we shouldn't allow this. This shouldn't be like this is bad. We mustn't let Russia grow its influence." But truth be told, what can we really do to stop it? What gives us the right to tell another country they can't get involved with other countries? And I got thinking about that because it is dangerous, but at the same time, I have a dilemma about Russia, because on the one hand, they are a very dangerous and corrupt country. There's almost no freedom of the press. There's a lot to be suspect of in Russia, or at least that's my understanding. I wouldn't be surprised if I've been told a lie. So, sure, if anyone wants to share anything on that, if you find anything, then please do. But on the other hand, Russia seems to me to be like a bastion of sorts. They're so solid in their stance. Regardless of the whole world looking down on them, regardless of the whole world criticizing them, they stick to their guns all the time. And they just don't care. And I like that. I've come to admire that, and now looking at them getting involved in other countries in Africa, actively, properly getting involved, I kind of admire that. When I look at the British Empire evolved, a lot of people look at it in a bad way, but Britain was a colonizing country, and by admitting and not being shy about that, they were able to go into those countries and actually improve them. But then what you got going on nowadays is you got like the United States and the UK military going into Middle Eastern countries and fighting off and over replacing the government and then pissing off. It's like, if you're going to go into another country, you've got to stick around and make sure that country it becomes stable. Britain colonized all these countries for hundreds of years. That's how long it took. You don't colonize it for a few years and then piss off. You stick around, you make sure it stays safe. But no, of course, we don't want to appear to be colonizers, so we don't do that. We just kind of stick around until we feel like the damage is done, until I think I was listening to the Ben Shapiro show not long ago, And he was saying how pretty much George W. Bush and Barack Obama and Donald Trump have all pulled troops out of Syria in their first term, early in their first term. And, it's kind of like, what are you doing? I'm not saying, I can understand. I don't think that the war should have begun. I don't think America should have got involved in the first place. But if you're going to get involved, do it properly. Don't beat around the bush. Just be like, look, we're going to change this country because they have a toxic ideology that seeks to see the end of our civilization and bring about their own civilization. We have a right to try and survive, to try and overthrow other civilizations just as much as they have a right to try and, a right. We have a reason. And Western civilization has brought great things to this world. Most of the world that we know it. As far as I know, if I remember there's a statistic, I'll have to find it later, but I believe it was 98% of technological innovation has happened because of the Western world. So, yeah. If you have a statistic that denies that, or you want to see the proof, I'll find it. Just comment on the video and I'll find it, yeah. But yeah, and then there's another thing that's going on in Russia is, not in Russia, and in Africa, is you got China is actually encroaching on that territory as well, making a lot of deals. And I remember hearing about them ages ago getting involved in South Africa. So it's quite interesting to see that these two, I know China is a growing power. Russia's been a major power for a long time. And they're going to be bashing heads soon. So that's going to be interesting. And I'm curious to see where that goes. Now, then another little thing I was thinking about is this whole thing about I don't know if you've heard the story about the Christian bakery. It happened a while back. Basically, a Christian bakery was asked to make a cake for a gay wedding by a gay couple, and they refused. And there was this whole big case, and eventually, I think the Christian bakery actually won the case. But that couple have gone and tried to get the guy caught out again by doing something else, which is, that's got to be harassment or something. But, that aside, I just want to, I find this baffling because it's not like they just went to a bakery. They're picking out that bakery because they know the guy's going to refuse because under religious grounds. But, it's not just religious grounds. It's ideological grounds. The cakes that he create on expression of his business and of his artistic ability. Now, I worked for a company a few years back, a web development company, and we got contacted by someone to work on a website. And after, as we kind of tried to figure out what the website was about, we eventually became aware that it was for a male escort service or something like that. It was, I don't know exactly, but that was something we did not want to work on. And as a business, we refused to build a website for them. And what will they do? Okay, they'll go find someone else to build a website. But in this case, you've got someone who's gone and say, I want you to make a cake for this thing. The guy says no, and they say, okay, well, that's discrimination. We're going to take you to court. No, he can refuse. He's not discriminating against you. He's not saying, I'm not going to make a cake for you. He says, I'm not going to make a cake, that kind of cake. I would make a website for any person, provided they were going to pay me, of course. But it's what the website is for that would change whether I'd want to make it. Because it's ultimately, it's going to be representing your company. If I make a website, that is a representation of my creations, my ability to create. If a website's horrible and a mess, I can't go, well, it's the client's fault. No, because I'm the one who's going to make the website. And it's my job to deal with the client, of course. Anyway, so I find this really baffling that people think that because you don't want to you don't support an ideology or you don't support a cause, be it gay marriage, transgender rights, anything really, you're allowed to refuse. Just as much you're allowed to refuse to me. If someone said, "Can you make a pro-pedophilia cake?" You can't say he's discriminating if he doesn't want to make it because no, he doesn't have to. And it's the same for anything, really. It's the same for anything. If you don't support it, you don't have to make a cake for someone. You can't do it on the basis of their race and gender and all that based on who they are. But really, honestly, I think even then you can make a case, because honestly, that's subjective. How can you know why someone does something? You'd have to really, that's a difficult one to prove. So, moving on to another thing. This is something that really affects me a lot for two reasons. And this is about GDPR. The General Data... Oh, I forgot the last two words. I guess privacy regulation? I'm going to Google that one. Protection. General Data Protection Regulation. It does involve privacy, but... and, you know, I like the GDPR changes that GDPR has brought about. I kind of like it because it's really made me aware of how much websites track. I already knew a lot of that, but on the other hand, as a customer, it is so infuriating because as a web developer, I do a lot of Googling, I do a lot of looking stuff up, finding libraries all over the place, reading articles all over the place, and I come across so many GDPR pop-up rubbish, you know, where they say opt out, opt in, and all that. And I always opt out if I have, like, they have to give you the choice now. And now that I've got the choice, I want to opt out. But they obfuscate it so much. You know, I came across a website just today, actually, and it said, click here to opt in, opt out. And then they had a button that says, find out more about our cookies. I clicked on that, and that showed the full list of opt-in and opt-out. Which, if I hadn't clicked on that, that wouldn't have actually shown all the cookies. It wouldn't have opted me out. And I just find it so dodgy. But what I'm really thinking about here, what concerns me, is that this whole GDPR is really just like it makes all these websites so much more... It makes the barrier for entry so much more difficult, because now I'm making a little website for a client, and he's having to go and manually look up GDPR regulation laws, and it's taking him ages, but it's cheaper than having to pay someone, some lawyer, to do this. And it's just crazy, because I just find it so crazy that you've got all these websites interlinking, tracking your data, and that's why when you go on these websites, you get this pop-up, and it's got like 100 trackers that will get your data. It's like, what on earth? And it just really makes using the internet so much more difficult, really. And while I like GDPR and what it's brought to in terms of privacy, its usability has been awful. And yeah, I mean, I think I wouldn't have, if I had to rewrite the whole GDPR thing, maybe I would have left it, honestly. Because I can assure you, I haven't had an opt-in, opt-out thing on Facebook. And that's probably because they have enough money and power to find a way around it. And if you can find a way around it, it's kind of pointless. Especially with a giant like Facebook, because Facebook is everywhere. Just a pro tip, if you ever see Facebook comments on a page, Facebook knows you've gone to that page. Facebook is tracking your clicks, tracking what you do on that page. It's so, yeah. And if you ever see a Facebook feed, anything that's been pulled in from Facebook, basically. I mean, if you're using some sort of backend API, you're fine. But if it's on Facebook, if it's a Facebook type widget, little tool, Facebook knows you're there. So, yeah. Make sure you try and block that. There's a few things you can use for that, but I won't go into that now. So, moving on, this is definitely a personal, I don't know what the words slipped out of my head. This grinds my gears. Let's put it that way. Video games, obviously, a lot of fun. And they've changed over the years. You know, if you look back decades ago, you know, when the era of Command & Conquer and Red Alert and Age of Empires, games were very different back then. And, you know, you might argue they were better, you might argue they were worse. But what I've seen and what I really miss is the age of demos. I knew a guy who he worked for a game magazine, and he used to just give us tons of these magazines just, give them to us because he had them, brought them home from work. And they all had a little CD attached to them. You might remember those days. And the CD had about 5-6 demo games, had like some Flash games, had all sorts. And I know like half the games I've played since becoming more active. This is back when I barely knew how to use a computer properly. And since becoming more active on the internet, more and more involved with computers, I have played most of these games. But I remember I was able to play the demo originally. And what we've seen now these last few, probably about just the last decade, but it's really the last half decade, is the rise of Kickstarters, which, that can be okay. And this whole thing of pre-ordering and early access, which just really pissed me off. Because there's this whole sort of point of view where, I say this, I have pre-ordered 1 or 2 games before, I'll go into that in a moment. There's this whole massive hype now, and it's now like 90-80% of games you pre-order them, or you get early access. And neither of those makes sense. Because you're pre-ordering, you say, right, I want to pay for this when it comes out, even though I haven't seen the finished product yet. And then you got early access, which is even more ridiculous to me, because that tends to be with smaller independent companies. Half the time, the game doesn't even get finished. I say half the time. I've got no statistic there, but it's just ridiculous that gamers are allowing it to happen by buying the games. And of course, you're not going to change that. It's the market. The market decides, and game companies have seen that the market is willing to pay for something before it's even bloody finished. Now, Kickstarters, I'm kind of okay with to a degree, only because there's some protections around that. Now, obviously, we've seen some more rubbish with the early access and pre-ordering around game companies not providing refunds or not providing returns. I remember the first game that ever brought this really to my mind was a game called Brink, which in the adverts, in the trailers, in the TV, in everything leading up to it, it looked amazing. It looked like a fantastic game. It had parkour, it had all these classes, it had a great world, and the concept was amazing. Then the game came out, and it was rubbish. Absolute rubbish. It was like you had a story, and the story, I love stories, I love video games with a great story. So you play the story mode, and it's essentially just a series of multiplayer bot matches with a cutscene in between. And so that really, really annoyed me. I didn't pre-order it myself, but a friend of mine did. And I've just taken on this this sort of approach the last few years. Let's say probably since 2012-ish, where I don't watch any trailers. I try and avoid all gameplay videos, trailers, any information. If I can avoid as much information as possible, I typically decide from the moment I know I'm going to play a game, I'll try and avoid any information about it. It can be difficult, of course. It's not that difficult. Sometimes I'll find out a few things. For example, I'm currently playing Assassin's Creed Syndicate. Now, I'm obviously late to that party, but little spoiler, if you consider it a spoiler. The game is set in Victorian era-ish, 1800s England, London. Now, consider for a moment that if you didn't know that, you'd play this game and you would be completely surprised by the setting. And all other things, the characters that you play, the weapons, the enemies, the story, everything would be a surprise to you. Same goes for films, which is every single thing you learn about a story is one less surprise. If you find out that someone is in a film, now you're not going to be surprised when you find out they're in the film. So maybe consider it yourself, leave your own opinion on that, where you think it's good or bad, but if you decide the moment you watch something, the moment you're going to watch something or play something, you just decide not to learn anything more about it, give it a shot. See how that works for you. Because honestly, it's worked great for me. I enjoy games, and I enjoy films tons more because I have no expectation. The video game company hasn't promised me amazing gameplay features because I don't know about those. So when I play the game, I usually, especially in like Assassin's Creed, I'm evaluating the game based on the last one I played. And it's worked great so far. I loved Assassin's Creed 3, Black Flag, Rogue I was partial to, but it was good. That was mostly because of the story, though. Anyway, so back in the first episode, I was talking about the people talking about the loss of jobs, automation and AI taking over jobs. Now, a lot of people are very pessimistic about it. They think, it's really bad. And I saw a video recently. This guy was talking about this, and he was saying how, yes, it was Tucker Carlson. Yeah, Tucker Carlson or Carlton. I think I'm getting his name wrong. Carlson, yeah, Tucker Carlson. And he was talking about how we need to, he kind of feels like we need to protect jobs of the workers. Now, I kind of disagree. Majorly, I mean, people need a purpose. A job gives you a purpose. People need something to feel fulfilled in their lives. It can, you got these activists and that's their purpose. They're making the world better or whatever they think they're doing. Then you've got people who, obviously their job, their daily lives, providing for their family, traveling the world. There's many ways to find it. It's easy to find it. Well, it's not easy to find a purpose, but there are many types of purposes. Now, technology is growing. Automation has long been taking over jobs. The advance of agricultural machinery allowed one person to farm what 100 people would be able to farm before. And it's going to keep happening. Technology does this time and time again. But it's not a bad thing. And my problem with this is that it's overstressing the importance of a job. So it's overstressing the importance of your career. It's not... I mean, I know how it feels. I was... after I finished college, I was sitting around for a couple of years without I hadn't got a job yet. I was sitting at home. And I had all these little projects I'd work on, but I kind of felt like I didn't have a point. I didn't know what to do. And then I met my now wife, I got a job, and when I got a job, that gave me some purpose, but what it really did was kickstarted something. I don't know what it was, but I started to have ideas. And now I've got so many ideas, I don't have time for them all. And I've got so many things I want to do. I want to work on like a live debating platform to allow, similar to what YouTube has, except focused on debates, focused on Q&A kind of thing, audience interaction. I want to build an app to help people get all sides of a news story and remain updated years to come. I want to write a platform to, this is all internet stuff. I actually want to start a company to build home automation stuff that's private and cheap and practical. But, we'll see about that. So I've got tons of ideas now. And that provides me with a purpose, even because I do contracting, even when I'm out of a contract, I still have a drive. But if I was able to just have some universal basic income, I didn't have to work, I'm sure people could find ways to make money still, but I just think that the rise of technology is not a bad thing. Human ingenuity triumphs. History has proven that. And yes, I know the future is an unknown, but really, we are an amazing species. Humanity has done so many great things, and I think that we need to stop being so pessimistic and thinking, we're going to destroy ourselves. Yes, maybe, but I highly doubt it. Every single, there's so much proof of every generation being super pessimistic, being like, we're in the end times. We look at everyone now. There's literally articles from like the early 1900s showing a picture of everyone at a bus stop staring at the newspaper because they're not socializing. Does that sound familiar? Because it does to me. Times don't really change that much and people don't change. The idea of people not socializing is nothing new. Okay, yeah. So I've got one last thing to talk about now. And this is this idea. I mean, this is something I've not really talked about before, but I'm a big fan of electronic music. I used to run an electronic music radio show. It was a lot of fun, and I still make sure I stay up to date on all the stuff that's going on, all the new stuff coming out. And you hear this there's a lot of, well, actually, it's thankfully it is dying out now. But there's a lot of people who look down on electronic music. Thankfully, yes, it's like I say, it's dying out now. But I just find it fascinating because if you look into electronic music, there is so much that goes into it. When you produce an audio track, obviously a lot of music producers, a lot of electronic music producers end up mixing their own songs until they become professional anyway. And so they end up knowing all the studio equipment, how to mix and master stuff. But then even before that, they have to understand frequency modulation and low frequency oscillators, and they have to understand wavetables and wavetables, and they have to understand different types. Yeah, so there's different types of modulation. They have to understand all the filtering and all the tools there that are involved. They have to obviously figure out how to use the software for modulating and automating a track as it goes through. There's so much you have to know. Now, obviously, just creating a basic tune, easy as pie. But there was a time where people thought that the piano would ruin music because it made it too easy. Because before this, you had to learn over years how to play a string instrument. And then they were going, oh, but yeah, now there's a piano and you could just hit the keys. It's too easy. Anyone can play it. It's going to ruin it. That didn't happen. And electronic music certainly has not ruined anything. There's one thing I love to say is the hybrid of electronic and what I call acoustic, but basically non-electronic music is fantastic. Because with a real instrument, with the guitar, with the drum kit, you can create sounds that are just really unique. With each drum hit will be different because of just physics and audio waves and sound waves. Hitting your guitar, you can do some weird stuff with your guitars. You can even there was one guy who attached, I think it was a group called Noisier, and they created a bass effect by just attaching a piece of paper to the speaker, playing a note through the speaker, and recording the sound of the paper vibrating off the speaker. That kind of stuff you can't really do with a computer unless you just really, really go down to the details. But real life, reality physics and sound waves, they create unique sounds all the time. And meanwhile, with electronic music, you can create sounds that do not exist. You can just, literally, there's guys who've emulated real sounds, but you can just do stuff that's not real. That would be too difficult in the real world to do. And so when you combine them, you end up having something you can create unique sounds constantly, and you can create sounds that aren't real, and you mix them together. You should check out some of these. There's tons of artists now who combine acoustic and electronic music, or just live instruments with electronic music, and the results are always great. So yeah, I think if ever I know most people nowadays are probably the opinion has shifted a lot. There are still a few grumble. I don't even know why I'm saying grumble. Grumpy people, let's say, who think that electronic music is not music or that it's too easy. Well, I think maybe you should probably learn a little more about electronic music before you say that, because so much thought goes into it. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up there. I'm going to finish for today. I've got a whole list of other things I wanted to talk about, but I will be talking about them next week. And I wanted to talk about some of the mass shootings, focus on the mass shootings that are going on. There was a discussion that was going on that I was getting engaged with, I wanted to talk about, which was the punishments for false rape allegations, because obviously that's becoming prevalent nowadays. A few other things about, the progression that happens when people try to mimic people of the past, the big events of the past, and they try and make comparisons. I also want to talk about the EU's unilateral system, and also something called, well, I've dubbed it foreign attacks. I'll go more into it next week, but essentially it's definitely something most people need to be aware of, because I find it very interesting. Because if it happened here in the UK, it happened in the United States, I'm pretty sure there'd be uproar about it. But I'll put it in a nutshell for now. Imagine you go to a country, and because you're not from the country, you get charged about 10 times more than the people who live there. Doesn't sound fair, does it? All right. That's it from me. I'll see you next week. If you have any opinions, if you think there's anything I said that's not true, or you want to comment on it, you want to provide feedback, just whatever, leave a comment down below. Of course, if you want me to substantiate anything, please leave a comment again. Just say, well, can you prove this? I'll do it. Okay. But if I can't, I'll put a retraction or whatever in the following video, because I don't want to say something that's wrong and then not actually correct myself. All right. That's it from me. See you next week.